I have no idea how we make that leap. But that's what happened this week is we decided to talk about the NBA draft.
I mean, we could always talk about the Darwin's theory of evolution compared to the evolution of the NBA draft, because from what we originally reported on to what happened last week,
oh my gosh,
insanely different.
Insanely different.
Beginning of last season.
It just I don't know what happened between then and there, but like my goodness, like for 6 months everybody was wrong.
Exactly.
It just
people were wrong like the week leading up.
Yeah. I mean, everything just changed like in the last, couple of days right before the draft. I mean, which actually is my first general thought on the draft. It's absolutely wild where these players were in comparison to where they were projected by several mock drafts earlier this year. By the way, hi, my name is David. This is the Hoop Southbound show.
Hey guys, it's Maddie.
Yeah, and that's our first general thought on the draft is none of the mock drafts had a lot of the stuff projected anywhere the way the NBA draft went. Maddie, your thoughts on that? Just because like we've been looking at mock drafts since January on this show and trying to get a feel on what everyone's thoughts are, and draft night, a lot of things come up a lot different.
Yeah, I mean, I think, pretty much everybody had 1 through 3 picked, and from there it was like you're gonna take 4 through 10 and then maybe 10 through 30, and you're picking names out of a hat is what it felt like was happening. Yeah,
it was kind of like, here's scenario 1, here's scenario 2, here's scenario 3. And those were the expectations that, for the first 5 to 7 picks, 8 picks, is that there'd be a couple of players, switching places and things like that. But then you saw players like Cam Whitmore, you saw Nick Smith Jr. Flying all over the place to nowhere close to where they were projected, even like a week out from the draft. It was crazy how it unfolded. And, we'll talk about that a little bit more about like what some of the thought processes probably were for some of these GMs. But yeah, that's the first impression I got while I was watching this thing is that everyone has projections here. These are the teams that are primarily circled. And no, this dude's ended up 10 picks back from all the projected landing spots. I.e. Cite Cam Whitmore and, Nick Smith Jr. But yeah, that was crazy. Let's move on to my second thought here. Like I said, we're going to circle around to Nick Smith. Brandon Miller going to tells me anyway, is that the Hornets are having a much more win now mentality and aren't looking merely to rebuild this team. Matt Norlander, he had that article, or he did that survey, of course, where he wrote that 7 out of 10 NBA GMs would have picked Scoot Henderson over Brandon Miller because they like his upside more. But overall, the move to me makes sense for the Hornets, given the direction that they want to head and the other draft picks that they're making. I think it ended up pretty well. Like I'm with Norlander, I understand, and like these other GMs, like the Scoot Henderson pick makes logical sense. But when you get Brandon Miller and then you have Nick Smith Jr. lined up, which we'll get to in a second, you checked all those boxes. You checked the Scoot Henderson box and you checked the we need 3-point shooting box.
Exactly. I think, when you look at their current roster, the fact that they had another pick within the first round, I feel like that's the best bet for the Hornets, because you get somebody who is immediately, obviously he's going to have to develop to the NBA play style, but you're going to see Brandon Miller fit very well into that current roster. And then you take Nick Smith, develop him, knocking on some wood that he is injury free, because that, from the consensus I saw, was the big concern there. Like you said, you've checked both boxes in one round of picks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember JJ Redick talking about, during his draft coverage, he was talking about like at some point you just throw out your draft board and just take the best player because this dude's fallen so much. Cam Whitmore fits into that category. Nick Smith Jr. fits into that category. These were not the projected spots. You look at your team needs and you're like, okay, team needs guy right here with uber amounts of talent. And then that scale eventually starts tilting toward, yeah, we're going to take the more talented guy versus our team needs aspirations. And that's what happened with Cam Whitmore going to the Rockets. And I think he went to the Rockets, and then Nick Smith Jr. going to the Hornets. Definitely interesting. Let's go on to that Nick Smith Jr. point. Him going to the Hornets. like I said, fills that role that many were thinking Scoot Henderson would play as that second point guard player. Here, though, Nick Smith Jr. can be used as an option as a shot guard as well at that number 2 spot. It really utilizes NSJ's combo guard skills. Very surprised how far he fell. I don't know if it was injury or if it was just defensive concerns, judging by Cam Whitmore and injuries being concerned and Nick Smith falling past those exact same teams. Apparently injury was probably a very prominent portion in a lot of people's minds. But you got to like the upside for that Nick Smith Jr. pick. And he's reuniting with Brandon Miller, who was his former AAU teammate back before college.
Yeah, like you said, shocked that he fell so low. I took my nephew to JJ so we could watch the draft together, and we kind of sat there. It was getting late for both of us, and I was like, okay, we'll stay one more pick to see if it's Nick Smith. And on the way home, I just had him sitting there refreshing ESPN so we could see when he got picked. He got picked like probably 10 minutes after we left, so we probably should have stayed, but I was thankful he finally got picked. And I think, he's going in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because he fell so low. So I think that's another plus for the Hornets is he's going to be there to prove something.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're talking well below the floor that everyone was projecting. Like the safety net in a lot of people's mind was around pick 19, pick 17, somewhere to the Lakers was like the bottom tier. They were thinking maybe the Jazz would be the very latest. There was a lot of consensus thought around that. And yeah, he's got to be coming in with a chip on his shoulder, almost being a second rounder, because let me tell you, he's not a second round talent. It has to be the injuries and what we saw with that. So that's what I think happened. I think that's what most people think happened. But it's very exciting if you're in the greater Charlotte area there in Buzz City, because you got 2 lottery picks, essentially, someone who's going to be a little bit higher risk in Nick Smith Jr. with the injuries. And then you got Brandon Miller. You can't be happier about the draft if you're a Hornets.
Congratulations, Kristen Sykes. You get to watch Miller and Nick Smith. It's going to be a great year of basketball for you.
Oh, he knows these rookies like the back of his hand. I'm telling you, he's going to be super excited there in North Carolina. All right, let's talk about the next one. My number 4 takeaway from this draft: Cason Wallace and Chris Livingston both get drafted by Kentucky, and it makes it 16 straight years with Cal having an NBA draft pick. I'm pretty confident that streak stays alive next year. I'll touch back on the Chris Livingston situation coming back around at the end of this. My number 5 takeaway: Anthony Black makes history for Arkansas by being the number 6 draft pick, the earliest Arkansas pick since ISO Joe Johnson. He will allegedly be keeping his number 0 at Orlando. Number 6, this wouldn't be a good conversation point here. Kobe Brown goes higher than many people thought he'd be at. Honestly, I'll tell you what happened with this once I finish reading this bullet. Brown was thought of as a mid-second rounder, and boom, he gets drafted at number 30. A little early compared to the general thinking in several mock drafts that we saw. Clippers must have been impressed to make that move. Not calling Kobe a reach by any means, but I'm very surprised to see him go before someone like Leonard Miller, who some were thinking could have been a potential lottery pick. So it's just 2 weeks prior to the draft, Leonard Miller was definitely projected higher than Kobe Brown. So very surprised by that. Just my little caveat. Yeah. Once Nick Smith Jr. was taken in the end of the first round, I was like, yeah, I've got a few picks. I can go take a quick shower. And sure enough, as soon as I got out of the shower, I'm like, oh, Kobe Brown's been drafted. Interesting. Didn't see that one coming. I had Kobe in the early to mid second round. So it's not too far off. It's just a little earlier than what we all thought. But, surprised he was a first rounder.
Yeah. I kind of was too, just because there wasn't a whole lot of buzz. We knew he was great because of how well he did at Mizzou this year. But it was just one of those things everybody was kind of like, we weren't expecting that. We were ready for, maybe 35, 36, a couple picks back. But, I think it's a good get for the Clippers for sure.
I think anytime so obviously you got a guy who can get in, hit 55% for the floor, I believe is what he hit at Mizzou last season. He made a huge jump offensively for the Tigers, but, the age was the biggest concern, is how much more potential is there? And that was the conversation from several scouts, several people who are experts in the draft who are like, Kobe Brown, second rounder, very talented, but like, that was the thought over and over and over again. And Clippers said, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And you know what? They've got a good player coming in. He's probably going to spend some time in the G League and still develop. Like, I don't think the course of his career has been altered drastically, but he's a first rounder now, and it's an impressive and it's a great resume point for Dennis Gates.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you kind of look at those players going into workouts and you see how they work with specialized coaches, like shooting coaches. You're going to have, your special defense coaches, a little bit of everything. And just, I think those workouts are really going to tell them how much potential and how much growth you're going to get from that player. So my suspect is that, he did really well and made progress with those individualized coaches that are going to help his skills improve.
Yeah, and honestly, being teachable is a skill, and I can definitely see, in some workouts along the way that Kobe Brown showing that he's highly teachable. So that's definitely always a skill that coaches want to see. So I would not be surprised if that played that he was a coachable player in those workouts that made him just quietly, very quietly, move up those draft boards. So and congratulations to Kobe Brown. That's awesome. It's a surprise, but it was awesome. And like I said, not a reach by many means. If it's a reach, it's a small reach. But you're in the first round. That's amazing. For sure. Absolutely amazing.
And not just Kobe Brown, Dennis Gates. Like, you took this guy who nobody knew who he was, unless you're just uber basketball nerd, to a first round draft pick this year.
People are going to know his name now, especially in the greater Los Angeles area. And he's going to be out there with Kawhi. All right, so let's talk about my number 7 one here. It's not really a big talking point, actually. This is be really quick. Jordan Walsh, G.G. Jackson, Julian Phillips checked into the second round, relatively where we expected them to get drafted. Noah Clowney as well in the first round, and the 20 is where we expected him to go as well. Not a lot of shocks there. Let's get on to my number 8 point here that I took away from the draft, and this one is kind of a shock. Ricky Council did not get drafted, and which was a surprise given that he had at one point even been seen as a first round draft pick as early as like February on multiple boards. We saw him slowly fall back, but he was expected draft pick in almost every mock draft that you looked at. Kind of surprised that Ricky Council did not get drafted, but he did pick up a 2-way deal with the Sixers.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Not only Ricky Council, I was a little shocked that Oscar Tshiebwe didn't at least make it into the late draft picks of the second round.
Yeah, the centers did not get a lot of love across anywhere in the league. Not a lot of bigs in general. I mean, heck, someone was including G.G. Jackson on their list on another podcast of bigs that got drafted, and he's like, and he's not a traditional big at all. And I'm like, no, he's a forward. So like, yeah, it's just not that time of basketball. We've talked about that all year. Is that the age of the center, maybe the time of it may have been the year of the center in college basketball. It is never, or it's not in the modern era. The center is going the way of the running back did in the NFL and the NBA. So it's a change, big time from the days of, Big Diesel Shaq going in and wrecking rims, so it's a different age. It's a different world we live in the modern game, and much more positionless basketball in this era. So it makes sense. It's just not what everyone expects, necessarily when they see someone. And it makes sense for some guy like Zach Edey of Purdue, who was player of the year, to say, yeah, I'm going back to college. That NIL money is pretty darn good, and I'm not having to fight for a spot on a roster. So, I think we'll continue to see that trend with centers coming back to college. It definitely hurts for Oscar Tshiebwe, who's probably going to be playing in the G League team this season. So we'll see how that goes. I haven't kept up too much exactly on what shaped out for that, but like, as I said, the way of the center, staying in college may be the best move that you have. All right, so touching back up on the Chris Livingston situation, this is my number 9 takeaway. Clutch Sports has to look like total idiots after this draft, especially with the Chris Livingston situation where he did not go until the final pick of the draft. Apparently, Clutch's CEO told teams not to draft Chris Livingston because there was already a place for him lined up. makes you wonder if they have players' interests in mind when it comes to these guys coming out of college and guys like Chris Livingston. Clutch Sports out here getting you the Mr. Irrelevant pick is not exactly high profile for a sports representation agency. Maddie, your thoughts on the Clutch situation? I don't know if you kept up with much of that during the draft.
I didn't keep up with it too much during the draft, but as the draft got closer, I started tuning in a little bit more. And it's just one of those things that it's like some of these older, I don't want to say out of touch agencies, it's just a little bit tone deaf, maybe the right word.
Yeah, a little dumb. A little dumb. We call it dumb. I mean, it's dumb. I mean, I can have opinions on that. Like, it's dumb. That's just my thought process. Is I just can't imagine. How are you going to go to a college kid and be like, "Hey, kid, I can guarantee you're going to be the last draft pick in the draft to the Milwaukee Bucks at pick 58." I'm sure that'll ring well in a lot of kids' ears as they come in. Yeah. Just weird, a weird situation. And not to mention like Chris Livingston's workouts and everything else. Just what did they do? They did not help that kid at all, in my opinion. So I definitely think we'll see some repercussions for Clutch here in the near future. All right. So my number 10 takeaway, Florida now has not had a draft pick in 9 of the last 10 drafts. Colin Castleton was their only real hope this year to make the draft. Of course, we saw centers did not particularly do well in the draft, but I do believe Colin Castleton did pick up a 2-way contract. The last player I'm going to mention here in my number 11 and final takeaway from this draft, Charles Bediako, going into the draft now seems very questionable. With him going undrafted, he could have been a big part of Alabama coming for this, into the season. Maddie, I just mentioned a lot of bigs in there unintentionally when I wrote these points out. Your thoughts on this stuff? Like, as I mentioned, centers going the way of the running back and might be better to stay in college.
Yeah, that was kind of the point I was getting at earlier with Oscar Tshiebwe is obviously I think he may have messed up staying in the draft, especially when he was getting super low picks. And it just seemed to kind of decrease from where he was at earlier this year. Charles Bediako kind of in the same situation where, he could have had a huge year at Alabama and, possibly improved his draft stock depending on how this year went. Because, not only do you look at, individual teams, but like Brandon Miller, he was obviously the focal point at Alabama. Not so much, but kind of get him out of the way. There's going to be more eyes on Charles Bediako, more opportunity for him to grow in kind of those recruiters' eyes. So, kind of same thing with Oscar Tshiebwe. He's obviously the focal point of the bigs in Kentucky. So.
Yeah, and now they're going on and fighting for a contract anywhere. That's where you are now. Let's turn the conversation a little bit. The name of this episode is, of course, SEC Dominant. The SEC dominance, absolutely dominant in this draft. SEC had the most players drafted. They had the most players drafted in the top 10 to include overtime elite, the G League, and foreign teams. The SEC had the most players drafted in each round. And then 6 different SEC teams had a draft pick. Arkansas, Kentucky, and Alabama all had multiple players drafted. Arkansas tied with having the most players drafted in the draft at 3 with UCLA, I believe. And then the SEC had 10 total draft picks. The other Power 7 conferences, Big 10 had 8. ACC and Big East had 5. Big 12 and Pac-12 with 4. And the AAC, or the American, had 3. Maddie, this is not just a football conference anymore. We've been saying it for a while. The investment is taking hold. SEC basketball continues to grow. So your thoughts on the SEC dominance in the NBA draft this year?
Yeah, I'm excited. This year we've seen the most one and dones out of Arkansas. We've seen, Kentucky to continue have eyes on them when it comes to the draft. And we're getting some other schools in the mix as well, with Alabama having 2 and Mizzou having Kobe Brown as a first-round draft pick, as we mentioned earlier. So I think, the spotlight on the SEC being a basketball conference only gets bigger from here.
Yeah, 100%. Well, regardless of the SEC's dominance in the draft this year, the national conversation, however, seems to be hanging around that the fact that only one of the top 5 picks came from a college team, and that was Brandon Miller. People were talking about if this is the new normal, will the G League and Overtime Elite take over the NBA draft? Maddie, I want to ask your opinion first, and then I'll give mine. Is this what we can expect going forward in the future of the NBA draft?
I think it kind of depends. I think we see a big push from the NBA here trying to keep people, you know, enraptured in, the elite teams in the G League and the NBA as a whole. They're trying to keep the system together. When you have players coming from straight from college, it's a different system. So I think the mind of the GM, in my personal opinion, is they're already going to know the system because the elite teams are structured just like an NBA team would. So it's more of one of those, do we take the chance, develop this college player to get them, on the same kind of mindset that these elite players have, rather than they're in the system, we're just going to draft them because they know what it's like already.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I think it makes sense. I personally think it's totally expected the G League and especially the European players. I like the European players more in the way that they developed. They develop versus the way that American players are developed. I expect them to be prominent in the draft. I don't know about Overtime Elite. That league isn't exactly super strong. And the Thompson twins, to me, are kind of outliers right now. We'll see if that trend starts moving forward and toward the top in the future. But Overtime Elite has kind of gotten plenty of criticism, especially on how poor it is on defense. They don't play defense anyway in the NBA, but so when Overtime Elite's getting criticized on their defense by NBA people, it's definitely, there's not exactly high caliber defense out there. But for college basketball, and the role in the future of being at the top of the draft, the best players coming out of high school, yeah, a lot of them are going to pick the G League Ignite. We saw players like Ron Holland do that in the offseason. But the way that college basketball stays alive, and I think the direction that college basketball is kind of headed right now, is that coaches that have had NBA experience being hired by these Power 7 programs and showing that they can develop NBA talent at a college level. I mean, look at the SEC teams coming into the draft this year: Arkansas, Kentucky, and Alabama. What do all those teams have more or less in common? And that's NBA experience on the coaching staff. Yeah, Eric Musselman, John Calipari, Keith Smart, Clay Moser, Ryan Pion. The list goes on and on for the coaches of these programs that have NBA backgrounds, that either were involved in these players or have came into the program now. Coaches are emphasizing this, and it's kind of evolve or die. College basketball has to evolve to get the best players to continue to go to college. So to me, that's what this is about. And I think the best teams going forward are going to be the teams that have NBA development ingrained in their program. So I think that's a big part of it. And I know there's going to be disagreements because maybe you're not an NBA fan if you're listening to the show. I'm not a huge NBA fan. I follow my Mavericks, and that's about it. When it comes to draft time, I'll start looking more and more, trying to get feel for what the teams need. But overall, I'm a college basketball fan before I'm an NBA fan by a wide margin. So to you, it's probably, as a fan, all that matters is that your team's winning. But at the other side of that and the rest of the conversation, you got to think of what these players want. And these players want a future. So the teams that invest in making good NBA developmental programs, I think, are going to continue to do the best. Regardless, and that's how college basketball is going to survive. You have to evolve. That's the entirety of the situation. That's my 2 cents. Maddie, you can criticize me any way you want on that one.
No, I agree for sure. I think, the way that we're going to start seeing more and more of these college players getting drafted before any elite teams or European players is, like you said, development. Because in the end, that's what all of these college players are reaching for.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about, life-changing money and everything else when you get to the NBA, and everybody has that dream. Everybody wants to be Michael Jordan. They want to be Kevin Durant, LeBron James, pick a player from your generation that you fell in love with. We all grew up when first time we put a basketball in our hand, wanted to be that guy. So
I mean, even I did back in the day. I remember I said I was going to be the first woman to play in the NBA because the WNBA didn't get any love.
Exactly. And you want to go to a program that's going to develop you and help you reach your dreams. All right. When we come back, we're going to be taking a look at some of the transfer portal news that happened around the league this week, including also Jahvon Quinerly. Moving out of Alabama, we have an excellent interview with Jordan Harper from Tides Illustrated talking to us about the situation. We're also getting a little bit on Jarin Stevenson coming to the Tide as well. We'll also be talking about LSU and the situation with Will Wade. It never dies. Maybe this will be the last time we talk about Will Wade on this podcast. All right, we'll be right back after the break.
Let's be honest, you're here because you love sports. We love sports too. And our friends over at Row One Brand love sports as much as we do. Row One Brand sells sports wall art, sports gift watches, and vintage apparel with ornamental designs created from real game ticket stubs and vintage sports memorabilia in their collection. If you want some vintage Golden State Warriors memorabilia, they have that too. It's a sports collector's dream website for anything sports related. Go over to row1brand.com to check out their great inventory. And when you use the promo code VSP15, you'll get 15% off any item on the whole site. That's code VSP15 for 15% off any item on the site. So click on the link below and go check them out. Row Run Brand, America's best vintage sports art, sports gifts.
Please always go out and support our sponsors. We're a big fan of that. Always makes life a little bit easier for us. It's always a good time, right? All right, so Maddie, obviously the big news on Sunday after I pre-wrote this show, and he was like, hey, I've got a great rundown here. We're going to have a great show on Monday and Tuesday morning. It's going to be fantastic. First big piece of news that came out was, of course, that JQ is not staying in Alabama, apparently, or at least intends to put his name in the transfer portal. And we have a great interview with Jordan Harper with the Tide Illustrated and the Double Dribble podcast here for you guys. And we welcome into the show Jordan Harper of the Tide Illustrated head basketball analyst and also the host of the Double Dribble podcast, a basketball podcast centered on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Jordan, how you doing today?
Doing good, David. How y'all doing?
Oh, doing fantastic. Obviously, one of the biggest topics this week that's been coming out nationally is around JQ. And I think Maddie has our first question today that we wanted to ask about the news that he's transferring.
Okay. Yeah, so the question I'm sure is on absolutely everybody's mind. Why in the world did we see him decide to transfer, especially this late in the game? Pretty much everything suggested that he was going to be one of the leaders, one of the starters for this Alabama team. So, I mean, if you have any insight, please give us your wisdom here.
Well, yeah, it's been a saga this offseason. If you've had your ears to the ground, that you knew that JQ, once he entered the draft process, you knew that there was a possibility that either A, he could stay in the draft, end up going overseas, or moving on from basketball. You never knew, but there was always that chance that he'd come back, and everybody kind of had that feeling all along that he was going to come back, use his 17th year, whatever it is by now, of eligibility, and be a leader on this team, where he's really stepped up big time in March, and he's been kind of that. I tweeted yesterday that he's that security blanket for Alabama. Even coming off the bench, you knew what you were getting from him. You're getting a high volume shooter, scorer. He does make turnovers at time, but he's that constant ball handling guard that they really needed when Jaden Bradley struggled. But he was going to be that he was going to come off the bench this upcoming season, but he was going to be that stable second ball handler, six man, and he was going to have a stable role. He was going to average, last year he averaged 21 minutes a game, and that's coming off a torn ACL. Previous year he was 30 minutes a game, so he was probably going to get the same. So I don't think it was role. I don't think it was, playing time. All of that canceled out. I'm sure y'all can kind of figure what's next, on what kind of lured him away. And I'm not going to mention that, specifically, but I think everybody can get catch my drift there. But yeah, I think that he was just lured away. That's the best way I can say it.
I can definitely pick up your vibe there, given some previous stuff that went down at other schools. So yeah, this will all skate around that. So what is the plan for Alabama going forward from this? What do you think Nate Oates' plan is to supplement the situation? And is the answer already on the roster, or do you think it's someone that he's going to try to pull in from the transfer portal?
Well, it's already this late in the process in the transfer portal. Pretty much, if he would have told Alabama's staff this, a month, 2 months ago, they were really after guys that like Keon Minifield that ended up going to Arkansas. They were really after him. But there was always that doubt in those players' minds, like, well, you got Mark Sears, you have Jahvon Quinerly probably coming back. They don't want to be the third point guard. So they kind of steered away from Alabama. So now this late in the process, there's no really good guards out there. With West Virginia's situation, Toussaint, their backup guard is in the portal, taking visits to Texas Tech and Kansas State this week. They recently reached out today. I mean, they're scrambling at this point to try to find that.
Oh, yeah. I actually wanted to ask a little bit further about Toussaint out of West Virginia. We just saw Kentucky today reap the benefits of the situation in West Virginia. I know that's a poor way to put that, but, Toussaint, Alabama's shown interest. What do you think the odds of him coming to Tuscaloosa are?
Well, I think there's a chance in the fact that they could probably sell him on getting JQ's minutes. And he's a senior. He's well seasoned. He's a guy that really doesn't turn the ball over much, plays solid defense even at his size. I mean, looking at his stature, his stats from last season, now he doesn't shoot the three ball as well as JQ did, and he turns the ball over less, but it could be like a JQ clone in some ways. It's just that smaller guard that's a great ball handler, great decision maker, playmaker. The only thing is he doesn't make shots, and that's kind of where Jaden Bradley's fallout was with Alabama. He kind of got pushed out because he couldn't shoot, and that's kind of where Toussaint is. But I really don't know, man. They have Mark Sears. That's the plan, that he's going to be the primary ball handler at point guard, and then after that, it's by committee with Aaron Estrada, Latrell Wrightsell Jr. I expect Rylan Griffin to have a breakout year and probably be showcasing his playmaking ability, so he might get thrown into that some. So right now it's Mark Sears and then committee. So unless somebody else comes into the portal, I think that's where it's going to stay.
Fair enough.
That's definitely the plus for Alabama's bench, in my opinion, as a lot of them stuck around. I think you're going to have a lot that were fighting for minutes last year that are going to get to kind of show what they're made of.
Yeah, that definitely. And reports I've been getting, Aaron Estrada looks the part. I could see him being an all-SEC caliber player. I mean, it's hard to win Conference Player of the Year twice in a row, no matter what conference you play in. But he's going to fit the part. Wrightsell will be a good guy off the bench. And an injury to her way of trusting, one or two of these freshmen that are coming in. So, everybody was raving about Alabama's backcourt, rightfully so. It's very talented. But a huge hit to the depth, losing JQ this late. Like I said, he's the security blanket of that depth of the backcourt. So now you got to either find somebody, whether it be Toussaint or somebody else that's there or will enter. I mean, you're probably going to have somebody enter in August. I mean, the way transfer portal's working right now. So you never know. But there's 2 spots open to fill, and everybody thought it would be a center that they would try to add, and now all of a sudden they're scrambling for a point guard.
Yeah, speaking of this transfer portal issue, it's kind of becoming big eye and around national attention, just based on the fact that we've seen so many late transfers putting teams in rough situations. And it's made some people have made their opinions very vocal about how they feel about the grad transfer rule when it comes to the portal. Do you think nationally we'll see anything like a rule change because of just the push for these late transfers come about in the NCAA?
Yeah, you're going to start getting a lot of coaches that are going to be irate, started getting irate, more vocal about it. You heard Trent Dilfer's interview, I'm sure, on radio recently saying, I'm going to call out any college coach that comes into my players' DMs and trying to steal them away from my team. Coaches are going to get fed up like that. And I feel like the more and more people start blowing it up that it needs to have a change, I think you're going to get one. But they've opened such a big can of worms on not having many guidelines at all, especially with the COVID year. And then now you can transfer one time for, basically free. And then we got to put these guidelines in. Well, these situations, it goes on and on. So until they put strict guidelines down and restrictions, you're just going to get players and coaches abusing the system, especially with tampering. Tampering's at an all-time high right now. So you're going to get that from both sides until the NCAA just lays down the law, which they haven't done, at all in years, seems like.
Yeah, it's definitely the weakest NCAA appearing or show of power of late these last couple of years coming out of COVID. But I do want to turn to some more positive Alabama news. I wanted to ask about Jarin Stevenson, a kid with a background from North Carolina, had some Tar Heel interest. Ultimately, he chooses Alabama. Why do you think Nate Oates was successful in pulling him out of the Tar Heel state?
That was a huge get, not only because of his ranking, his talent, his potential, just because he's a North Carolina legacy. His mom played for North Carolina, won championships there. They live, I believe, 10 to 15 minutes from campus. And they've been recruited by North Carolina this whole time. Like, if he wanted to go to North Carolina, he would have committed, a year or two ago. But the fact that he stayed true and uncommitted and really played the field shows to me that I don't think that him or his family really trust Hubert Davis. I don't think they trust his vision. I don't think they trust what he's doing. And you already know after, the kind of fluky, I think, run he had a couple years ago, that he's already on the hot seat. He has all that talent and he's not doing anything with it now. So I think they were kind of hesitant about that. Nate Oates is already kind of established, and they really sold him on the Noah Clowney role. He is a Noah Clowney clone, not as well polished. Obviously, he's only 17. He'll be eligible for the draft next year because I believe he turns 19 next October. But he's a guy that can not only protect the rim with his wingspan, he's going to have to get bigger, but his ability to step out and shoot, his ability to make plays in the open court, he can handle the ball really well, make plays. He's a great passer. He just fits that Noah Clowney role, and I feel like that's really what they sold him on. If he stayed in 2024 class, I think he would have went to North Carolina or Virginia ultimately. But you see Alabama's depth chart in the front court. They needed him bad this year. And I think that's really what they sold him on.
Oh, 100%. Definitely when you had 3 roster spots opening there on decision day, it was definitely interesting. So, Gigi Jackson was an early commit to college as well there in South Carolina. And now Jarin Stevenson is too. Do you think this is a trend we'll continue to see from players jumping up early in a class?
I think you will with situation. I think you'll see it in players like Jarin or Gigi that birthdays fall luckily before the end of the calendar year for the draft, where they can go one and done. A lot of players, a lot of their parents really want them to go that path. I don't think it's smart personally, unless you're a guy like you saw Gigi. If he would have stayed in his class, really developed again, worked on his body, and then went into college, I feel like he would have probably been a higher draft pick. He fell a good ways, but you're just not mature enough going into college at that age. You know what I mean? Physically, emotionally, mentally. We've seen Kyra Lewis do it. We've seen Joshua Primo do it. And they played really well in college. But that's, 1 in 100, 2 in 100. Most times you see reclassifications, it just doesn't work out.
100%. I don't think any of us were the same person they were at 17 going to 18, 19 as well.
It's a big jump.
It's a huge jump. Yeah. You're exactly right on the maturity issue. I mean, we had Gigi Jackson come out a few days ago apologizing for some comments he made after the Arkansas game at South Carolina. There are maturity issues in both physical and mental. I'm not saying Jarin Stevenson is going to be that way, but you're exactly right. I think you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah, and I don't think Jarin will make – people's going to have to temper their expectations for Jarin. A lot of people just look at him as, oh, he's going to step right in and be 11-9 with, a block and a half a game like Noah was. No, he's not. Noah was more polished and more physically ready to play in the NBA or in the college basketball when he stepped on the campus because he's a year older. And I feel like Jarin, while he may end up starting, I don't know that 4 spots really wide open if they want to go that route and put Grant Nelson at the 5. But that's a huge spot to fill, and he might be thrusted into that role just because the other 2 guys behind him are going to be freshmen. If they decide to put Nelson at the 5, they could easily roll with Nelson at the 4, Pringle at the 5, and let Jarin come off the bench playing 18 to 20 minutes a game and kind of ease them on in. But it's going to be a big learning curve right off the bat for him, and it starts in mid-July when he's expected to enroll.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you talked about how huge of a get Jarin Stevenson is for this Tide team. And then you talked about, some of the downside of him being younger going into this class. What do you think these Alabama fans can expect from Stevenson the coming season?
Well, I feel like he'll probably play 20 to 25 minutes a game. Maybe not starting right out the gate unless he just flat out impresses coming into summer, going into fall. But I feel like you can easily see a 8.5 rebound line. It might even get up close to 10, depending on how his outside shot works or how it develops. Because Noah Clowney, that's where he got a lot of his shots early on, was from the 3. Because, quite frankly, players and teams didn't respect him. And Jarin has that opportunity to do that, set the tone, how teams are going to play him. If they just think he's going to be a inside scorer, they're going to lay off, and it's going to make it really tough for him to score. But I feel like he's going to have to be a somewhat of a rim protector on this team because this team doesn't have much height in the front court, especially experience-wise. So you might see him more hovering around the basket defensively and playing more outside offensively to really spread the court. So you might see him shoot more threes and get inside shots. So you might not see him score as much. But I can realistically see 8 points, 5 rebounds, at least until conference play, and then that's really where it's going to step up.
100%. I mean, it makes sense to me. It'll definitely be an interesting ride to watch where Jarin Stevenson ends up when conference play turns over. I've got one more question for you. We normally ask a fun question at the end of interviews. I was going through your Twitter today, and I saw you're a big Jacksonville Jaguars fan. So yes. I'm asking for a bold prediction right now from you on where you think your Jags are going to end up this season.
I feel like a bigger bold prediction, I think Trevor Lawrence finishes top 3 MVP. That's my big, bold prediction, okay? I feel like he's going to have a huge breakout year with Calvin Ridley on the team now. But I feel like Jags are going to win the AFC South for sure. But I feel like this year they're going to get the Chiefs in the divisional round. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to finish with a top, still probably be the 3rd seed behind the Bills and the Chiefs. But I think whether they play the Bills or the Chiefs in the divisional round, I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to go back to the AFC Championship game.
I mean, that's definitely an entertaining pick. We were sitting here talking about players maturing and everything else, and you got Jacksonville right now maturing and everything.
Trevor Lawrence's jump, while it statistically wasn't, incredible, like a, Justin Herbert 4,500-yard season, just the improvement from the turnovers is what's so impressive. When the game's supposed to speed up for you in year 2, it slowed down, or, it slowed down for him. And then only adding, Calvin Ridley and then Tank Bigsby, I'm really high on, adding another weapon. I think it's going to be a really good year for him, an improved defense. I think Chiefs are going to start losing a step offensively as all these guys go elsewhere, and I think the Jags are going to catch them. I think they're going to do it.
Well, I wish your Jags the best of luck this season.
Appreciate it.
Yep, I'm definitely envious as a Cowboys fan because I wanted Doug Peterson for myself.
What'd you think of that boys game? What'd you think of the Jags?
Let's not get into
I was dead in the water when they went up big, and I'm like, gosh, do I want to keep watching this? But I did, and my goodness, what a collapse! I don't even call our comeback incredible. That was just a collapse by your boys.
It was painful. It's been painful since 2014 in my mind, and probably a little bit since before then. It's been a long life. I was born, the last time I was alive the last time we won a Super Bowl, but dadgummit, I wish they would hurry up and win another one.
Well, I mean, at least you got that for you. I've got what, 2 AFC championship games, 3, and I think one of them we lost to the Titans for the 3rd time. There only are 3 losses all year, and it was through the Titans all 3 times the year they lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, at least you got that going for you.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. All right, Jordan, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Definitely an insightful conversation. If you want to let everybody know where they can find you at, please do so.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at HarperNation24. You can catch all my updates on, I tweet a lot about Alabama basketball because that's what I do for Tide Illustrated, which is the Alabama site on the Rivals Network. And you can also follow my podcast, the Double Dribble Podcast, covering solely Alabama basketball. Has been since 2019 and still going strong. So give me a listen, give me a follow, and I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Jordan.
Yeah, appreciate it, David.
You know what I like? I like to be comfortable. I also love representing my favorite sports teams. And in the Clutch, I am able to have the best of both worlds. In the Clutch Apparel is your one-stop shop for all things sports. They have officially licensed gear from all your favorite teams and players from the NHL, MLB, NFL, and more. They have sports classic tees from yesteryear and beyond. Check out their full website in the link down below. When you enter the promo code Variety Sports, you get 10% off everything site-wide. Feel comfortable with your sports apparel and go over to their website now at intheclutch.com. And don't forget to use our code Variety Sports to get 10% off.
It's not your dad's league anymore, or your grandpa's league, really. That's the truth right there. Our dad's league is Michael Jordan's league, but
I don't know. It could be dad's league. New Balance is coming back.
It's true. New Balance.
I want to see LeBron step on the court and beat somebody's pair of New Balances.
Some white New Balances, like some ugly white New Balances, dad shoe to the max.
That looks like it has grass stains on the sides.
Absolutely. Something that you just straight up got done mowing the lawn with. Absolutely. All right, I want to thank Jordan Harper again for coming on to the show and talking to us about Jarin Stevenson and the JQ situation there in Alabama. Definitely some interesting stuff. There's some other news around the transfer portal. Maddie, a little bit closer to home to us. Of course, Chandler Lawson from Memphis. Woohoo! Go Tigers for you. Penny Hardaway's in trouble. Arkansas picks up a 6'8" combo forward, former top 100 prospect known for his versatility and athleticism in the front court. He spent 4 years at both Memphis and Oregon. Another pickup for Eric Musselman, and one that you're probably pretty happy with after losing your shot at Grant Nelson.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not big on talk radio, but I was listening a little bit to the ESPN radio this morning on the way to work, and they were talking a little bit about Chandler, and just sounds like a really good get for Arkansas. Mentioned his wingspan at 7'7".
Yeah.
So, if we don't get boards this year, I'm not gonna be happy.
Yeah, definitely. That's quite a wingspan. Like I said, you need a little bit of more versatility, more more ability to play the 4 spot than just Trevin Brazile. That was the thing that Arkansas was needing. That's why they went after Grant Nelson. That's why they went after Ron Holland. And now they got somebody in Chandler Lawson to play that backup role to Trevin Brazile at that 4 position. So, you got a much more well-rounded roster. Arkansas definitely looks like a top 15 team at this point. Pretty well put together. It's definitely interesting seeing someone of that caliber come in. And who knows why he transferred? I mean, he's a grad transfer. It makes sense that he can do this at this point. But, given the situation at Memphis, I think I can understand him saying, peace. I'm out. Penny Hardaway's in trouble if you did.
I was about to say, he really just got a slap on the wrist. He's not going to be out for any conference games. There's not much of a change there for Memphis. So I think, really, I don't know personally, but I think, you look at it and see what Coach Muss has done with the development of other players. And you have a guy who's been at Memphis for 3 years or 4 years. Did he come in from somewhere else?
Yep.
I thought he came in from somewhere else.
From Oregon was the other spot too that he played basketball. He played with basketball at Oregon and he played at Memphis.
Yeah. So, just being there, with hopes that Penny Hardaway coming from the NBA, still having those NBA ties is going to get him a little bit further. And, what we previously talked about, the point where everybody wants to get going to be a college basketball player to the NBA. So I think it's a big portion of seeing what Eric Musselman has done for these players and all these draft picks he's had in the last 4 years, hoping to push him a little bit closer to looking at that as an opportunity in the future.
Even if he doesn't get drafted, I mean, you've talked about guys like, you point to Mason Jones, you can point to Stanley Amude. You can find guys. Yeah, Jimmy Witt Jr. There's all sorts of guys out there that Eric Musselman has had an impact on to help get to the league in some capacity, or at least the G League, to have a professional career. And then, the door's wide open for Europe as well, where JD Note is at right now. So, there's definitely a future. You're coming into a team that's got a ton of talent that you're going to be fighting for minutes for. But, it's going to be much more of that Eric Musselman flavor of what his first couple of teams were, where you're fighting for minutes on that team. Yep. You're not going to just be guaranteed a spot anywhere on there. And you can go throughout the course of non-conference play to basically try these guys out and see who's going to get these minutes and who's not. And Muss can run 8 deep at that point, which is kind of his MO. It's what he likes to do, is have 8 solid dudes out there to take over a basketball game. And it's the Eric Musselman recipe for success. And Chandler Lawson, I think, fits well in that, where he's got a team that he's going to be having to compete with. And, it only strengthens Arkansas's depth in the long run.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we see Muss reaching deep into this bench this year.
Deep, relatively deep for Muss, maybe. And conference play for sure. That would our non-conference play, I should say. That would be my guess, is where he goes deeper. But as it goes on, just like we saw, 2 years ago with the JD Note year and everything like that, a little bit more. We know who the 8 who are coming into this game is going to be. That would be my guess for the future of the Eric Musselman team in Arkansas next season. Yeah. Let's talk about another transfer that just happened, and we're going to touch on this just a little bit here. We need to talk about Kentucky. So while it was out, and I don't know, I forgot if it happened in between the 2 shows that you did, or if it happened in between the last show and now. I've forgotten.
I think between the last show and now. So I think I saw it like Tuesday night or something. Okay. That would have been great to talk about.
Yeah, Huggins. So we have not mentioned anything about the Huggins DUI, nor are we going to, other than it's a very sad situation. That's what it comes down to and what it boils down to. A lot of West Virginia players starting to transfer out of that situation. And one of the beneficiaries of that situation, I hate the way I'm phrasing that. There's got to be, Kentucky's picked up Trey Mitchell, which is a good get, because this West Virginia transfer class was outstanding. And Kentucky picking up Trey Mitchell helps a lot for the situation that Kentucky was in, because my goodness, things were getting bad in Kentucky.
Yeah, I think at this point, Cal just needs to go buy some lottery tickets. I mean, he's kind of got that with his gig at Kentucky, but man, does this help his standing? Because, we kind of looked at it as Cal was edging on the hot seat a little bit.
Yeah.
After last season. So I think, starting to get a few more solid transfers is really in his favor going into this season.
This team is still extremely young. I want to point that out. But getting Antonio Reeves back and then adding Trey Mitchell helps Kentucky tremendously with the experience on this team. And then adding 3-star guard Joey Hart to Kentucky helps a little bit with that 7th freshman in this class. I'm going to say it now, though. There's a narrative currently going around Big Blue Nation and like, hey, look, we took we had all this bad faith in Calipari, and he delivered for us after all. He did this. I'm gonna challenge that a little bit, and I'm gonna come out and say that Calipari is extremely lucky, given the circumstances, because you don't get Trey Mitchell if Bob Huggins doesn't get fired from if Huggy Bear doesn't get fired from West Virginia. You're not getting Trey Mitchell. That's opinion number one. Number two, I don't know the full story on the Antonio Reeves situation, but that one was probably 50-50 to begin with. So pulling Antonio Reeves back in is good. But then, you've also got another depth piece and a freshman that, just happens to not be committed to a team right now at this given moment. In Joey Hart. It's real lucky. It's real lucky that you've got some players, and it's still a very young team. We're talking about a team that's loaded up with 18-year-olds who are going to have to go play. And we've mentioned this before, Bud Walton. They're going to have to go play in the PMAC. They're going to have to go play in all these very intense environments across the SEC, which the schedules came out today. I'm spitballing here a little bit, but on their road schedule, but they're going to have to go play against some grown men playing basketball. So, and some very hostile environments. We'll see how that shakes out. Cal's done a pretty good job with young teams in the past, but again, there's a lot of experience on these teams that he's going to face. I don't know if it necessarily just takes Kentucky to a whole different level to where, we were talking about, SEC favorites coming in, possibly, which that still might happen. We'll see.
Wouldn't be surprised.
We'll see what the SEC preseason poll says. They had Alabama 5 last year. So they're solid. But what we say at the beginning of last season, we'll take the field over Kentucky. But when it comes to this, in all honesty, there's gonna be some talk about Kentucky being higher than what they should be. To me, Kentucky is a top 25 team now that they've added Trey Mitchell, but I don't see them just rocketing up the polls by any means or becoming a preseason favorite to make the Elite Eight. I don't see that. Maddie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this takes them, to throw in my favorite song here, out of the danger zone into we may have a fighting chance to end up in the top 6 or 7.
Yeah. I think Kentucky is going to end up being in the top 4 for the SEC when it's all said and done, because they might do really well at home. But don't be surprised if things go bad at some point. Don't be shocked about that, because it's going to be tough. They have to play Arkansas twice. I know that from their schedule. I was excited when I saw that. So, like I said, you're going into Bud Walton. That's going to be a good Arkansas team with a lot of experienced players. So you're going to face that in similar circumstances around the league. It's not an easy road. So it's going to be you have to get this team to gel now very quickly. And this team's very soon, they're going to have their chance to gel, because they're about to go play some international basketball as they represent the United States. So in the Global Jam this year. So it's coming up here in less than 3 weeks for that Global Jam. So hopefully they can start putting this team together during that time period. But it's, like I said, Calipari is extremely lucky in my mind. Yeah. So like I said, I'm going to push back on that narrative a little bit about, look how great Cal did. But Cal came through for us after all. Cal got lucky. Cal got real lucky.
Like I said, with his luck, he needs to go buy some lottery tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Some scratching. After I got Trey Mitchell, I would just stop by the gas station to go get some scratch offs just to see. It's man, but I think the universe is on my side today. I did something right in the past life, and it's paying off right now. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how Kentucky does. All right, let's talk about LSU. So catch everybody up to speed here. Former LSU men's basketball coach Will Wade, who was fired for cause in March of 2022 due to multiple NCAA Level 1 violations, allegations dating back to 2017 have been assessed, and a 2-year show cause order and a 10-game suspension have been released on him for McNeese State. For LSU, the penalties for the Tigers include a reduction in scholarships by 1 over the 2023-2024 season and by 1 over the 2024-2025 season. A 15-week ban on unofficial visits during the 2022 and 2023 academic year. Reduction in the total official visits permitted by 2 during that same academic year. The 7-week ban on telephone communications and all prospective men's basketball student athletes during that same academic year, and an off-season recruiting restriction for 20 days, an off-campus recruiting restriction for former head coach, former assistant coach, and then assistant coaches for 30 days, dating back to that April and through May time period in 2019. Look, a lot of that doesn't make, it's there. A lot of that is dated back previously. Like that situation in LSU was absolutely crazy with Will Wade. But there's some justice in the world. I think I have 2 takeaways from this. Number one, if you're Kansas, you're not sweating as much anymore because you're also wrapped up into this investigation. And then number 2, I think McNeese State was almost punishment enough to send Will Wade to go coach that team. That should be like the new punishment for any one of these violations. Yes, I stole that joke for anybody who's like, but I agreed with it, so I'm parodying it right now. But yeah, that to me, that's use your sports to go coach a bad mid-major team. To me, that would be the excellent punishment for any coach, no matter what.
Yeah, I actually had an LSU fan in my office the other day, and he saw my Razorback stuff, and he said he was an LSU fan. I was like, ugh. I said I shouldn't even have let you in here. He was like, well, we LSU fans don't even think about Arkansas. And it's like, first of all, like that is not why I care. It was like, I just hate Will Wade. He was like, oh, I don't watch basketball. Exactly.
LSU basketball is good overall compared to a lot of SEC teams, but they fall into that stereotypical SEC fan where basketball comes second for sure. Not basketball comes second. Basketball comes second for sure. It's probably even third in LSU fans' minds because baseball probably jumps up in front of it.
This year for sure.
Oh, 100%. 100%. They're stoked right now in Baton Rouge for what's happening. But, it is what it is. It's a growing sport in the SEC, and it's growing well if your team is invested in it. So, there's schools who care about football, and then there's schools who care about everything. So, but for LSU, it's rough right now. They're going to have a bumpy road ahead of them when it comes to basketball, but it shouldn't be too bad. It's one scholarship loss, which yes is annoying. You don't necessarily want to see. And if you're McMahon, yeah, it stinks because you're trying to build a program there in LSU. But overall, it could have been way worse. It could have been way worse. We'll see how it goes. Again, the NCAA is a little less hesitant ever since the 80s with the SMU situation to, smack the hand of God upon people when it comes to recruiting violations. So, I'm not surprised that it wasn't just ridiculous. So,
yeah, no, I was expecting something to come. I figured it'd be a slap on the wrist. So I'm actually kind of surprised that they were as heavy as they were. Figured it'd be, like a Penny Hardaway situation where you're suspended a couple games, but they're going to be games that don't really matter. Unfortunately, it isn't exactly a slap on the wrist for Will Wade. I mean, it is, but it's more of a slap on the wrist for LSU. Like, don't hire a coach that's going to do stupid stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a message, right? Don't do this. But, we'll probably never face a similar situation like this again. This was pre-NIL. This was pre-everything else. Will Wade was pretty egregious with it. Don't get me wrong. But, the allegations were anyway. But we'll see. Like I said, I'm not here to judge Will Wade. I'm not here to do any of that. But it was that was definitely a circus for a while across the SEC when you get student sections coming out in FBI jackets when they're playing LSU and in games and stuff like that. So, like I said, if you're Kansas though, who's got similar things following them regarding the Adidas situation, you're probably sitting a little bit better. Like that's it. Okay,
That's fine.
We won a championship 2 years ago. It doesn't matter, like you're taking a deeper breath, I think, if you're other programs. But those allegations.
Their punishment, that outfit that Grady Dick wore, that was punishment.
Oh my goodness, I was not going to make a joke about that, but like, I just like what was that? Like, he looked like Dorothy's shoes exploded on his jacket. Like
he literally said that's the reason he wore it, because he's from Kansas and Dorothy's from Kansas. I was like, you need to snap your heels and go back home, sir, and find something else in that closet to wear.
It's ugly. It's ugly. You can't wear that, bro. Like maybe you can pull off velvet, but like the sequin like that was it's horrible. It's one of the ugliest jackets I've ever
seen.
I
said, he is trying to be the NBA Ken doll. Like, that is 100% what he looked like.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I will say, though, I think my favorite headline that came out of the draft I just saw recently was that Danielle Musselman made Muss wear a tie to the draft because she told him, you are not that young and you are not that cool to go tieless. You have to wear a tie.
He hates suits, right? He's talked about that. That's why he wore the polos even pre-pandemic. Yeah. He just hates wearing suits. It's not his thing. He's commented on it in the past. It's funny. Yeah, Danielle making him wear the suit and tie. That's great. At least he wasn't running around shirtless at the NBA draft. It's like we had 3 picks.
I was gonna say, I was half expecting it when AB went number 6.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. It's just one of those things, I'm sure we could go find pictures of Eric Musselman and everything else running around shirtless at the NBA draft somewhere in the future, but I doubt he ever does.
When we get a number 1 pick.
When we get a number 1 pick, that's when Muss go shirtless at the NBA draft. Please like, subscribe to the show. We'll be back next week with more content. And as Maddie mentioned about our Freshman 15 series, that'll be coming up in September. Coming up very, very soon. And actually starting next week, Maddie takes over the show for 3 weeks. Not in the same capacity she did in the last 2 weeks. I'll be here along with her. But it'll be Maddie's show. We'll go over a couple SEC headlines and then do some ridiculousness because it's that time of year. And then also we're going to be doing Basketball 201 here very soon. Another series that we'll be doing on the show, and the best state by state series will be returning here very soon as we pick it up with Kentucky. Obviously I couldn't do it because, Pathfinder school kind of took precedence. Best school I ever went to. Best school the Army ever sent me to. It was really, really challenging. Learned a lot.
Yeah. So what was your favorite part?
My favorite part was the field exercises with, helicopters and doing crazy stuff that, putting all the training to head. The math was the part that killed me. It's like a super smart school. And then the last part of it is like, now let's go out in the field and do Army stuff. So it was fun. And like I said, anybody who's National Guard or active Army, go to Pathfinder School. It's a really good course. So if you're listening to this show, it's a really good course. You should definitely sign up to it if you're eligible.
Those videos that you sent me of you in the chopper 100% made me think of like Forrest Gump when what is that song? It's by Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Fortunate Son.
Exactly, yes.